Birds 365, Mac and Mac guys here to hang with you for the next 2 hours on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. We got about 100 of you all streamed in. So I'm going to ask you guys, since you're here this early, you must like something about the show. So go ahead and hit that like button to start the show off on the right foot, right? Why not?
Thank Championship week. Yeah, man. We've been through it all together, so you might as well finish it off with us here on Birds 365.
Yes. If you like the Philadelphia Eagles, then you should like Birds 365. So just go ahead and hit that like button as we get the show underway. Johnny Mac, we got 2 hours to look at the matchup between the 49ers and Eagles, which is now less than 80 hours away. The countdown is truly on. But before we do, I do want to just give a nod to a couple of Philadelphia Eagle guys, or at least one, who got acknowledged, and a couple who didn't, which I think is just highway robbery. When it comes to NFL awards, yesterday the Associated Press named their finalists for a bunch of awards, and a couple of Eagle guys are in the mix, and a couple of Eagle guys aren't. And this is going to sound so Philadelphian, but I truly feel this way. The snubs are worse than the guys who actually ended up are in the mix for their individual awards. No great surprise, Jalen Hurts is in the MVP finalist. They go with 5 for MVP, and the other awards, they just go with 3. So somebody, first of all, has to explain that to me.
We got to get Rob back on to explain this situation, because everything was whittled down to 5, and then all of a sudden Rob Motti, who's in charge of the voting for those people who don't know from the Associated Press, then he put up 3 finalists for certain categories from the 5, but he didn't put up 3 in certain categories from the 5. So next time Rob is on, I got to ask him.
And we had Rob on earlier this week.
Yeah.
And he did kind of tip his cap that one of the Eagles' assistant coaches was going to be a finalist for assistant coach of the year. He wouldn't tell us which one. We know it's Shane Steichen. So he did kind of hint at it, but he didn't give us all the details. We know the details now that Jalen Hurts is an MVP finalist, 5 individuals in the mix. He's probably going to finish second to Patrick Mahomes, but we'll see how it shakes out. And great season for Jalen Hurts. If he steals the award, God bless him. Great for him. Great on him. And Shane Steichen, I just mentioned, is a finalist for Assistant Coach of the Year. Good on Shane. But Nick Sirianni isn't one of the top 3 for Coach of the Year in the National Football League. Are you kidding me? Where this team came from to where it finished up, most wins in the National Football League. How is he not one of the top 3? I like the 3 that are in, Dable and Dougie P. and Shanahan. They all had great years. I don't know that any of them had a better year than Nick Sirianni. Oh, he's not in the mix for that. I don't understand. And even more annoying is the fact that Brandon Graham, after playing just 2 games last year, he played 2 games. He had 2 tackles, 0 sacks. In his 11th season in the NFL, he gets the most sacks he's ever gotten, 11. And he's not one of the comeback players of the year. A couple of running backs, Christian McCaffrey, who, oh, by the way, is a guy who may decide the game on Sunday with the way he runs the ball for the 49ers. Saquon Barkley and Geno Smith, I'll give it to you. Quarterbacks have such an impact on the outcome of the game, and he goes from being a career bench warmer to the starter of a playoff team in Seattle. How is Brandon Graham not one of the top comeback players in the league this year, Johnny Mac?
I don't know. You know me, Jody. I don't get upset at these things, because ultimately it comes down to the definition of each voter, right? And I say that all the time, and everybody has different definitions. Like, I'm with you on comeback player of the year. What the hell did Geno Smith come back from? Being a backup? Yeah. I mean, I give him credit for being a tremendous story and proving himself when he got an opportunity. That's all great, but he was a backup for most of his career on merit. And that to me is not a comeback. That to me is like a breakthrough. If you want to have a breakthrough player of the year award, that to me is a breakthrough. You got to be coming back from something. I think Saquon Barkley played 13 games last season. Don't quote me on that, but I think he played 13 games. So what is he coming back from? Ineffectiveness? That to me is not a comeback. That to me is hey, getting yourself right, improved, most improved. Now he's got such a reputation. Whatever award you want to name, to me, a comeback should be players overcoming something. And Brandon overcame a torn Achilles at his age to play at as high a level he ever has. Now, that's probably an overstatement, but he's played at a
Not
very
really.
high level. Well, I know people get caught up in sacks, but Brandon Graham has been a very good player for a very long time. I just think a lot of people don't recognize it because uh, the sack numbers haven't been in double digits, and getting up to that number has a lot to. Guess what? He would have been up at that number if he had Hassan Reddick helping him a number of years ago. So my point is, he's been a great player for a long time, but he came over something very significant. Overcame something very significant. So I'm on board with that. But people have different definitions. So I think their definitions are wrong. I can say that. But that's how they look at it. That's the lens they view the world through. There's nothing I can do about it. Nick Sirianni to me is more interesting because if you phrase it, like you did back in August or back in the off season, he's coach of the year. But the Eagles were so good, like everybody's expectations changed. Oh, that's a good team. That's a good team. So most of the voters, and it's always been this way when it comes to coach of the year, vote for the guy who does the most with the least. Bill Belichick could have had 10 in a row. I don't know, but they never gave it to him because the Patriots were expected to be at that level year in and year out. Andy Reid now, the Kansas City championship game. He's not in the final three because they're expected to be that good year in and year out. Brian Daboll, I think is going to win it because they weren't expected to be a very good team. And everybody looked at them in the offseason and said, wow, that's a disaster. Poor Brian, hopefully he can get things going in the right direction. And they not only make the playoffs, they win a playoff game. Kyle Shanahan's a little bit different, but he overcame, they lost their starting quarterback. They lost their backup quarterback. Now he's in the championship game with a third string quarterback. And everybody goes, wow. So it's all about expectations. And the Eagles got so good, like everybody forgot their early expectations and then said, well, anybody can win with A.J. Brown and Hassan Reddick and an MVP candidate playing quarterback. And people forget nobody saw an MVP candidate. And I said the people that claim they did, you're lying.
You're lying. Exactly right.
Well, or you're such an Eagles fan, you think every Eagles quarterback is going to be the MVP. One or the other. You're either unrealistic or you're lying. But people forget the expectation halfway through the season, and then it becomes readjusted. And Nick Sirianni's just the coach of a really good team.
So what you're saying to me is blame the Eagles for getting out to an 8-0 start.
Yeah, exactly.
That took the expectations to a new level, and that made Sirianni just
literally,
doing what he was supposed to do.
It did. It literally did. And they were too good, and everybody readjusted their thought process. Again, if you could take everybody, in a slumber and they want to sleep with their thoughts on the day before the regular season, went into hibernation and woke them up and said, oh God, the Eagles are where the Eagles. Nick Sirianni, coach of the year. That's what would have happened.
No, and if that's the case, and you might be right, John, that's not the way that is gone in previous years. NFL coach of the year, or any other sport coach of the year, that the voters are smart enough to remember, well, here were my preseason. If you needed to write it down on a piece of paper to know what your expectations were, if you weren't mentally strong enough to remember what your expectations were, then shame on you. Why do you have a vote? You don't deserve to have a vote. Shame on the voters for this. Or specifically, well, I'm sure that when Rob put out the top three yesterday, he didn't just jump around. He kept them in the order that he had them. So Sirianni didn't finish in the top 4 in voting. Shame on the voters.
Can I also add, outside of Philadelphia, and I wrote about this yesterday, Nick is not as well liked outside of Philadelphia because of the way he acts at times. That probably a little bit as well, but more so, I think people readjust, and I think it's not a matter of being mentally strong enough. I think people realize it. They just readjust their thinking and saying, "Well, I didn't know this team was so talented." And he's got so much talent, where somebody like Dayball did so much with nothing. I think they go in that direction. That's most voters.
Well, again, I'll go back to Shanahan. He's just, and oh, by the way, they'll match you off on Sunday in the NFC Championship game where both teams deserve. He's got a lot of talent too, but somehow he made it.
Well, yeah, but Jody, here's the difference with Shanahan. And by the way, I think Nick should have been a finalist. I guarantee Nick would have been a finalist if he won the final 5 games with Ian Book. I guarantee he would have been a finalist. That's the difference between Kyle and Nick.
Well, here's the way I look at it. He's got his best quarterback playing right now. He may have been third string on the depth chart. If you can readjust your thinking as you go with Nick Sirianni, oh my God, he's got a lot of talent, so you can expect him to do that. Well, guess what? I think Brock Purdy's a better quarterback than Jimmy Garoppolo, and I think Brock Purdy's a better quarterback than Trey Lance. So just
you didn't
because
think that
the guy started the year as the
Jody,
third-string quarterback doesn't mean he was the third-best quarterback. Same exact thing as adjusting, readjusting.
Yeah, but
for
I
Sirianni.
just said
the same thing for the quarterback.
But I just said if the Eagles won the final 5 games, you're the hypothetical guy. I said if the Eagles won their final 5 games with Ian Book. Now, I guarantee you, Jody, you're doing it yourself right now.
Go ahead.
When Brock Purdy came in, you didn't think he was the best quarterback on the board. You think it now, but you didn't think it when he stepped in. There's no way you could have thought, oh, Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, the 7th round pick. Yeah, he's better than the 3rd overall pick in the draft. And but now I know you don't like Trey Lance, but he's better than Jimmy Garoppolo. You like Jimmy more than I do. There's no way you thought Brock Purdy was better than Jimmy Garoppolo. I can't stand Jimmy Garoppolo, and I didn't go that far. I mean, he's an NFL quarterback. He's made a Super Bowl. He's made 2 championship games. Now, granted, Kyle holds his hand just like he holds Brock Purdy's hand. There's no way you're going to sit here and look in this camera and say you knew Brock Purdy was their best quarterback. Kyle Shanahan sure as hell didn't know. He sure as hell didn't know. Yeah, Dick Vermeil back in the Trent Green days,
John,
he didn't know.
100% right. I'm not going to say that. But if we're going by, you can readjust your expectations on the fly, like you're suggesting voters did with Nick Sirianni. I do the same exact thing with Brock Purdy. I've now seen what I've seen.
Yeah, but I'm giving you what you're missing is I'm giving you the Jody Mack hypothetical. If the Eagles won their final 5 games with Ian Book, I know you don't like Ian Book, but this is a hypothetical. If the Eagles won their final 5 games with Ian Book, Nick Sirianni would be a finalist.
I agree with that. But now let's jump back into the real world and leave hypothetical to the side. We know what Brock Purdy did. We're projecting in hypothetical terms what Ian Book could have done. Yeah, Ian Book could have done this. It becomes irrelevant to the vote.
You would have said the same thing before Brock Purdy. That's what I'm trying to impart. People are giving Kyle more credit for getting a rookie quarterback, a rookie 7th round pick up to speed. Remember, how many games has San Francisco won in a row? They haven't lost in 3 months. 12. So they had won what? That's counting the playoffs. They had won 5 in a row anyway before Brock Purdy got in the lineup.
I say 8 because Purdy came into the Miami game trailing 7-3 in the first quarter.
Well, the point was, all right, for him all right, 4-0, whatever you want.
No, that's 8-0, 6-0 in regular season, 2-0 in the playoffs.
No, I'm saying before he got in the lineup, they had already won 4 games in a row. They were starting to get their stride. They were starting to move. They were starting to. We all know how talented they are. They were starting to get it with Jimmy Garoppolo. Again, a limited quarterback. people are giving him credit for getting a third. And by the way, they should give him credit. I mean, if you're not going to give Kyle Shanahan credit for getting a 7th-round pick ready to get to the NFC Championship game after losing, and remember, this is a guy who knows a little bit about quarterbacks. And his plan was to go with Trey Lance, and then he had to go with Jimmy Garoppolo. He knows a little about quarterbacks. It wasn't like he was saying, oh, I got to get Brock Purdy in there because he's better. Just like, to Dick Vermeil's credit, back in the day, you like the Kurt Warner comp. Dick was crying because he thought Trent Green was his guy. And these are people that know a lot about quarterback play. So to get somebody like that ready, if Nick Sirianni did that with Ian Book, and I know people laugh and say, no, that's goopy. You would have said the same thing about Brock Purdy. You would surely, and most people,
you're right.
Most people said, oh, their season's over. Their season's over. They're down to the 3rd-string quarterback, and here they are in the NFC Championship game.
The one significant difference is Jalen Hurts played like an MVP this year. He's in the MVP finalists.
Oh, that
Jimmy Garoppolo never got into that conversation.
Well, that's part of it.
I don't think Trey Lance will ever get into that conversation. We're just talking about positions on a depth chart. The difference between where Jalen Hurts is right now and what Ian Book could potentially be and what Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance have achieved and what Brock Purdy has done are two very different.
Well, that's part of it too. I think a lot of the voters go, well, Jalen played at an MVP level, and they don't go back to August and say most of them, and I'm going to say all of them, didn't see Jalen Hurts playing at an MVP level, and they're not giving Nick Sirianni credit for that because the guy's playing at an MVP level. It's not right, but I'm just saying that's how it goes. That's just how it goes. That's why I can't get upset by it, because people think the way they think and you can't control it.
Well, let me ask you one more question. Good point by Mint Diggity here on the stream. Do you think Sirianni lost the Coach of the Year award because Jalen did go out for 2 games and Gardner Minshew went 0-2?
Well, it didn't help him.
We can argue about Brock Purdy and how good he is compared to Garoppolo and Trey Lance. They held their own. No, let's be truthful. They got better when a quarterback who was coming off the bench got in with the Eagles. Gardner Minshew.
Yeah, it didn't help it. And again, people are going to look at loss, and they're not going to look at the Dallas game where Gardner played very well. The New Orleans game was a disaster. Yeah, they're going to see 0-2, and most aren't going to do the homework and say, well, they were pretty damn competitive in a tough spot, 3 straight road games, Christmas Eve, Dallas. That was a pretty tough spot to win a game with Jalen Hurts, to be honest. I was talking about it all year. So 0-2, it hurt him. But Kyle's not going to win it either, Jody. He's not going to win it either. Yeah, Brian Daboll's going to win it.
You're right. And my homework says, Gardner Minshew threw 3 interceptions against the Cowboys. I don't think that should be forgotten. He threw for a lot of yards. It was a close game. He did throw for 3 INTs. All right, Jody Mac, Johnny Mac coming back. We will talk to our bud, Ed Kratz, Special Ed's up next. Mr. SI himself here with us on Birds 360.